In this Blender tutorial for intermediate users, I will show you how I use vertex painting for texturing. I'll first introduce you to the very basics of vertex painting in Blender. To use vertex paint in Blender, you need a bunch of vertices on which to paint. So I will add a plane and then subdivide it multiple times. Under the Object Data Properties, you will see a Vertex Colors panel. This can be thought of as layers within the vertex painting option. In the Vertex Paint node, you will see the brush options and color options displayed at the top of the viewport. The F key will scale the brush, and Shift F will change the strength of the brush. Under the Active Tool tab, you'll have access to the same tools as those above the viewport, as well as other panels that will allow you to control the brush properties. If you right-click in the viewport, you have quick access to the color picker. If I choose a color and I begin to paint, we'll see that I can paint on the plane in a very similar way I can paint with weight paint or texture paint. In the Object Data Properties tab, notice that you now have a layer in the Vertex Colors panel. I can now add a second layer, and I can change the color back to white. Using Shift K, I can now flood fill the plane with white and begin painting on the second layer. Now I'll add a third layer, and I'll make this a simple black and white. And I'll double click on each of the layers and rename them. In the shading workspace, back in object mode, I add a material and then add each of the vertex color layers via the vertex color shader input. If I connect either of the first two layers to the base color of the principled shader, you will see the vertex paint layer just as I painted it. The black and white layer can be used to control things like the metal and roughness of the other layers. If I connect the black and white shader to the metallic of the principled shader, you can now see that the black painted area is not metallic and the white painted area is fully metallic. I can also add a Mix RGB node and blend the two color layers. Now that you know the basics of using Vertex Paint in Blender, I will show you how I mix two materials together using these techniques. I'll be using the Node Wrangler add-on to set up my shading nodes. I add a new plane, scale it up, and in edit mode, I subdivide the plane to add multiple vertices. I'll now add a displacement modifier, and I'm going to use a cloud texture. And then I'm going to reduce the strength. Under the shading tab, I'll add a new material. And the links for the two materials I'm using are in the description. Select the principled shader, and using Ctrl-Shift-T, I bring in the textures for the first material, which will be my ground. I duplicate my roughness node, and then I open up the AO map. I'll use a mix RGB node, to mix the color map and the AO map. And I'll use multiply for the mix factor. Now I will add the second material. I duplicate the principled shader, and using Ctrl-Shift-T, I bring in the textures for the second material. Then I duplicate the roughness map, and open up my AO map. Again, using a mix RGB, I mix the color and the AO. I will now begin the process of blending the two materials. I need to add a mix shader, and this will allow me to mix the two materials together. I connect the principled shader of the first material to the top shader input, and the principled shader of the second material to the bottom shader input. I then connect the mix shader to the surface of the material output. This will give me a mix of the two materials. By changing the factor of the mix shader, I can control which material is dominant. I'll keep this at 0.5 since I'll be using Vertex paint to control which material has dominance. Add a Vertex color node and a separate RGB node. I connect the color of the Vertex color node to the image input of the separate RGB node, and I connect the blue of the separate RGB node to the factor of the mix shader. This will allow me to use the color blue in Vertex paint mode to determine where the two materials will be blended. I add a mix RGB node, and I connect the displacement of the first material to the top color of the second mix RGB node, and the displacement of the second material to the bottom color of the second mix RGB node. I then connect the color of the mix RGB to the displacement of the material output. Then in Vertex paint mode, I use the RGB sliders to change the color of the brush to pure blue. When I hold down Control and begin painting, I can now reveal the first material. If I release Control and paint, I can reveal the second material. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and turn on the notifications. Have a good day.